It is our values that you use while damning us. It is our language that you use while denying the mind. Just as your mystics of spirit invented their heaven in the image of our earth, omitting our existence, and promised you rewards created by miracle out of non-matter, so your modern mystics of muscle omit our existence and promise you a heaven where matter shapes itself of its own causeless will into all the rewards desired by your non-mind. For centuries, the mystics of spirit had existed by running a protection racket, by making life on earth unbearable, then charging you for consolation and relief, by forbidding all the virtues that make existence possible, then riding on the shoulders of your guilt, by declaring production and joy to be sins, then collecting blackmail from the sinners. We, the men of the mind, were the unnamed victims of their creed, we who were willing to break their moral code and to bear damnation for the sin of reason, we who thought and acted while they wished and prayed, we who were moral outcasts, we who were bootleggers of life. When life was held to be a crime, while they basked in moral glory for the virtue of surpassing material greed and of distributing in selfless charity the material goods produced by blank out. Now we are chained and commanded to produce by savages who do not grant us even the identification of sinners, by savages who proclaim that we do not exist, then threaten to deprive us of the life we don't possess, if we fail to provide them with the goods we don't produce. Now we are expected to continue running railroads and to know the minute when a train will arrive after crossing the span of a continent. We are expected to continue running steel mills and to know the molecular structure of every drop of metal in the cables of your bridges, and in the body of the airplanes that support you in mid-air, while the tribes of your grotesque little mystics of muscle fight over the carcass of our world, gibbering in sounds of non-language that there are no principles, no absolutes, no knowledge, no mind. Dropping below the level of a savage, who believes that the magic words he utters have the power to alter reality, they believe that reality can be altered by the power of the words they do not utter, and their magic tool is the blank out, that pretends that nothing can come into existence past the voodoo of their refusal to identify it. As they feed on stolen wealth in body, so they feed on stolen concepts in mind, and proclaim that honesty consists of refusing to know that one is stealing. As they use effects while denying causes, so they use our concepts while denying the roots and the existence of the concepts they are using. As they seek, not to build, but to take over industrial plants, so they seek, not to think, but to take over human thinking. As they proclaim that the only requirement for running a factory is the ability to turn the cranks of the machines, and blank out the question of who created the factory, so they proclaim that there are no entities, that nothing exists but motion, and blank out the fact that motion presupposes the thing which moves, that without the concept of entity, there can be no such concept as motion. As they proclaim their right to consume the unearned, and blank out the question of who's to produce it, so they proclaim that there is no law of identity, that nothing exists but change, and blank out the fact that change presupposes the concepts of what changes, from what and to what, that without the law of identity no such concept as change is possible. As they rob an industrialist while denying his value, so they seek to seize power over all of existence while denying that existence exists. We know that we know nothing, they chatter, blanking out the fact that they are claiming knowledge are not absolutes. They chatter, blanking out the fact that they are uttering an absolute. You cannot prove that you exist or that you're conscious. They chatter, blanking out the fact that proof presupposes existence, consciousness and complex chain of knowledge, the existence of something to know, of a consciousness able to know it, and of a knowledge that has learned to distinguish between such concepts as the proved and the unproved. When a savage who has not learned to speak declares that existence must be proved, he is asking you to prove it by means of non-existence. When he declares that your consciousness must be proved, he is asking you to prove it by means of unconsciousness. He is asking you to step into a void outside of existence and consciousness to give him proof of both. He is asking you to become a zero, gaining knowledge about a zero. When he declares that an axiom is a matter of arbitrary choice and he doesn't choose to accept the axiom that he exists, he blanks out the fact that he has accepted it by uttering that sentence, that the only way to reject it is to shut one's mouth. Expound. No theories and die. An axiom is a statement that identifies the base of knowledge and of any further statement pertaining to that knowledge, a statement necessarily contained in all others, whether any particular speaker chooses to identify it or not. An axiom is a proposition that defeats its opponents by the fact that they have to accept it and use it in the process of any attempt to deny it. Let the caveman who does not choose to accept the axiom of identity try to present his theory without using the concept of identity or any concept derived from it. Let the anthropoid who does not choose to accept the existence of nouns try to devise a language without nouns, adjectives, or verbs. Let the witch doctor who does not choose to accept the validity of sensory perception try to prove it without using the data he obtained by sensory perception. Let the headhunter who does not choose to accept the validity of logic try to prove it without using logic. Let the pygmy who proclaims that a skyscraper needs no foundation after it he's its 50th story yank the base from under his building, not yours. Let the cannibal who snarls that the freedom of man's mind was needed to create an industrial civilization, but is not needed to maintain it, be given an arrowhead and bearskin, not a university chair of economics. Do you think they are taking you back to dark ages? They are taking you back to darker ages than any your history has known. Their goal is not the era of pre-science, but the era of pre-language. Their purpose is to deprive you of the concept on which man's mind, his life and his culture depend, the concept of an objective reality. Identify the development of a human consciousness and you will know the purpose of their creed. The savage is a being who has not grasped that is and that reality is real. He has rested his mind at the level of a baby's, at the state when a consciousness acquires its initial sensory perception and has not learned to distinguish solid objects. It is to a baby that the world appears as a blur of motion, without things that move, and the birth of his mind is the day when he grasps that the streak that keeps flickering past him is his mother and the world beyond her is a curtain, that the two are solid entities and neither can turn into the other, that they are what they are, that they exist. The day when he grasps that matter has no volition is the day when he grasps that he has, and this is his birth as a human being. The day when he grasps that the reflection he sees in a mirror is not a delusion, that it is real, but it is not himself, that the mirage he sees in a desert is not a delusion, that the air and the light rays that cause it are real, but it is not a city, it is a city's reflection. The day when he grasps that he is not a passive recipient of the sensations of any given moment, that his senses do not provide him with automatic knowledge in separate snatches independent of context, but only with the material of knowledge, which his mind must learn to integrate. The day when he grasps that his senses cannot deceive him, that physical objects cannot act without causes, that his organs of perception are physical and have no volition, no power to invent or to distort, that the evidence they give him is an absolute, but his mind must learn to understand it. His mind must discover the nature, the causes, the full context of his sensory material. His mind must identify the things that he perceives. That is the day of his birth as a thinker and scientist. We are the men who reach that day. You are the men who choose to reach it partly. The savage is a man who never does. To a savage, the world is a place of unintelligible miracles where anything is possible to inanimate matter and nothing is possible to him. His world is not the unknown, but that irrational horror, the unknowable. He believes that physical objects are endowed with a mysterious volition, moved by causeless, unpredictable whims, while he is a helpless pawn at the mercy of forces beyond his control. He believes that nature is ruled by demons who possess an omnipotent power and that reality is their fluid plaything, where they can turn his bowl of meal into a snake and his wife into a beetle at any moment, where the aid he has never discovered can be any non-aid they choose, where the only knowledge he possesses is that he must not attempt to know. He can count on nothing, he can only wish, and he spends his life on wishing, on begging his demons to grant him his wishes by the arbitrary power of their will, giving them credit when they do, taking the blame when they don't, offering them sacrifices in token of his gratitude and sacrifices in token of his guilt, crawling on his belly in fear and worship of sun and moon and wine and rain and of any thug who announces himself as their spokesman, provided his words are unintelligible and his mask sufficiently frightening. He wishes, begs and crawls, and dies, leaving you, as a record of his view of existence, the distorted monstrosities of his idols, part man, part animal, part spider, the embodiments of the world of non-A. His is the intellectual state of your modern teachers and his is the world to which they want to bring you. If you wonder by what means they propose to do it, walk into any college classroom and you will hear your professors teaching your children that man can be certain of nothing, that his consciousness has no validity whatever, that he can learn no facts and no laws of existence, that he's incapable of knowing an objective reality. What, then, is his standard of knowledge and truth? Whatever others believe, is their answer. There is no knowledge, they teach, there's only faith. Your belief that you exist is an act of faith, no more valid than another's faith in his right to kill you. The axioms of science are an act of faith, no more valid than a mystic's faith in revelations. The belief that electric light can be produced by a generator is an act of faith, no more valid than the belief that it can be produced by a rabbit's foot kissed under a stepladder on the first of the moon. Truth is whatever people want it to be, and people are everyone except yourself. Reality is whatever people choose to say it is. There are no objective facts, there are only people's arbitrary wishes. A man who seeks knowledge in a laboratory by means of test tubes and logically is an old-fashioned, superstitious fool. A true scientist is a man who goes around taking public polls, and if it weren't for the selfish greed of the manufacturers of steel girders, who have a vested interest in obstructing the progress of science, you would learn that New York City does not exist, because a poll of the entire population of the world would tell you by a landslide majority that their beliefs forbid its existence. For centuries, the mystics of spirit have proclaimed that faith is superior to reason, but have not dared deny the existence of reason. Their heirs and products, the mystics of muscle, have completed their job and achieved their dream. They proclaim that everything is faith, and call it the revolt against believing. As revolt against unproved assertions, they proclaim that nothing can be proved. As revolt against supernatural knowledge, they proclaim that no knowledge is possible. As revolt against the enemies of science, they proclaim that science is superstition. As revolt against the enslavement of the mind, they proclaim that there is no mind. If you surrender your power to perceive, if you accept the switch of your standard from the objective to the collective and wait for mankind to tell you what to think, you will find another switch taking place before the eyes you have renounced. You will find that your teachers become the rulers of the collective, and if you then refuse to obey them, protesting that they are not the whole of mankind, they will answer, by what means do you know that we are not? Brother, where did you get that old-fashioned term? If you doubt that such is their purpose, observe with what passionate consistency the mystics of muscle are striving to make you forget that a concept such as mind has ever existed. Observe the twists of undefined verbiage, the words with other meanings, the terms left floating in midstream, by means of which they try to get around the recognition of the concept of thinking. Your consciousness, they tell you, consists of reflexes, reactions, experiences, urges, and drives, and refuse to identify the means by which they acquired that knowledge, to identify the act they are performing. Then they tell it, or the act you are performing when you listen. Words have the power to consider you, they say, and refuse to identify the reason why words have the power to change your blank out. The student reading a book understands it through a process of blank out. A scientist working on an invention is engaged in the activity of blank out. A psychologist helping a neurotic to solve a problem and untangle a conflict does it by means of blank out. An industrialist blank out. There is no such person. A factory is a natural resource, like a tree, a rock, or a mud puddle. The problem of production, they tell you, has been solved and deserves no study or concern. The only problem left for your reflexes to solve is now the problem of distribution. Who solved the problem of production? Humanity, they answer. What was the solution? The goods are here. How did they get here? Somehow. What caused it? Nothing has causes. They proclaim that every man born is entitled to exist without labor, and, the laws of reality to the contrary notwithstanding, is entitled to receive his minimum sustenance as his food, his clothes, his shelter with no effort on his part, as his due and his birthright. To receive it from whom? Blank out.